Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the afternoon sessions. My name is Professor Graeme and I'm going to speak today about some of the work we've been doing when it comes to nutrition and performance and sports science in general in the golfing world. It's always nice to have a nutritionist following the lunch session. Don't blame me for the lack of green matter at the lunch, but hopefully what we can do today is give you a few insights into how we now try and feed the players at the elite level. Being a medicine conference, I thought I would start off with a little bit of a background to myself, and despite being a passionate golfer, that wasn't always my career choice. Before I became follically challenged, as I like to call it, I was trying to make it as a rugby league player. The picture on the right is the current state of my left knee. And when that's the seventh time this has happened to you, you realise that this perhaps isn't the career for you, and then you move on to something different. And this is where I'm based now at Liverpool John Moores University. And whilst a lot of my research involves taking muscle biopsies from rugby players to try and understand how best to feed the human body, it's not just rugby where I've spent my working life. I've worked with the Lawn Tennis Association, heading up nutrition for them. England Rugby is obviously where I've done most of my work, most recently working with Dillian Whyte, ready for the Tyson Fury fight, and a lot of time working with jockeys as well. But as I said, this is my passion, and that's why I'm absolutely delighted to be here today. Probably one thing that unites us all in this room is this passion for golf, and I've been able to combine that passion over the last decade heading up nutrition for the DP World Tour and Ryder Cup teams. A few years ago now, I was asked to contribute a book chapter for the book Science in Golf. And it was genuinely the hardest piece of writing I've ever had to do. So I've written the chapters for Science in Soccer, Science in Rugby, and you could write them with your eyes closed. There's so much research. But as you do when you start to write a book chapter, you do the literature searches. And then I spent a lot of time just scratching my head, because most of the research I could find on golf was reviews of quite average science in golf and reviews that I really didn't want to put my name behind. And because of that, I thought, well, actually, from a nutrition perspective, when it comes to research, I think we need to go back to square one and start it all again. So when I contributed this chapter to Karim Khan and Peter Bruckner's textbook in clinical sports medicine, I tried to outline what it takes to work as a sport nutritionist, where we start with understanding the demands of the event, then we would assess energy intake, expenditure, body composition, and work all the way through to the formulation of a dietary plan. And that's actually quite easy to do in football. But when we try and do that in the world of golf, it becomes almost impossible. And the reason that it becomes almost impossible, as I'm desperately trying to move the slides, is that when we look at all these, I can't find any real, what I would say, high quality evidence in absolutely any of these categories. And even the absolute fundamental of any research, which is understanding the demands of the event and assessing energy intake and energy expenditure, I'm still not convinced we know that, despite us being told a lot, even this week, about the energy demands of the sport. And I'll tell you why I don't think we're able to do that yet. But what I do see as an academic researcher is a huge opportunity for research in these three fields. Now, one thing we know is that golf's come on a long way from where it was when it comes to the nutrition. And no longer have we got the days of maybe having a tab on the tee, where in fact we're now trying to fuel it better with some bananas, some fruit, and we're trying to maximize our performance through nutrition. So when I looked at this scoping review that Andrew put together, the first thing that stood out to me when I looked at the energy expenditure section is it was suggested within the literature that a game of golf is anywhere between 531 and 2,467 calories. Now, any researcher at this point should be falling over, banging their head against the wall and thinking, what are we publishing? Because two reasons. One, how can a game that is pretty similar be so different? How can you range from 531 to nearly 2,500? And I've even seen reports more recently of 3,000 calories. The other thing is, when we look at that, that's up to 8.15 kilocalories per minute if we look at the high one. that's beyond the energy expenditure of running a marathon. So when you run a marathon, typically you're looking at about 100 calories a mile. So about 2,600 calories to run a marathon. And I'm sure we've all played golf, and none of us have walked off a golf course thinking you've just run a marathon, or I really hope we haven't. And often we'll play, maybe 2 games in a day. That's nothing like running 2 marathons, is it? So we've got a major issue, I think, within the literature, that for some reason, we've got some quite incorrect evidence being put out there. So when we add the RMR onto it, it's similar now to around about 5,000 calories a day. And the reason that I think this is a fundamental flaw that we need to address is that if we're prescribing golf, like we've talked about today, for health and well-being, the last thing we want to tell people is you can now eat 5,000 calories. Because before we know it, we're now going to create obesity as another problem on top of our golf. I don't think anyone in this room would argue with me, but it's not the same as Andrew running his mad marathons that he does on a daily basis. And why do I think we've got it so wrong? Well, when I was being taught research methods many years ago as a student, all I remember from one of the lecturers, he used to say, and I'll use a better word, rubbish in, rubbish out. That was always his mantra for research. If your measurement tools are rubbish, your data's going to be rubbish at the other end. And what I think we've done in golf far too much is say, yes, it's inconvenient to gas analysis, and we're not going to do that. So we'll use whatever tool we've got available, which is often inherently inaccurate. So I'll give some more examples. We've used double labelled water a lot in professional football and professional rugby to understand the demands of these games. And for those who've not seen the DLW technique, it's basic where you drink this stable isotope, and then you get isotopic exchange, and then by measuring the different clearance of hydrogen and the oxygen, you can work out the CO2 consumed, which then using standard equations, we can put a caloric equivalent on that. So it's the gold standard way of measuring energy expenditure in free living individuals. So when we did this in Liverpool Football Club, the typical energy expenditure of the football players who are training for 2 to 3 hours per day and a match per week is about 3,400 calories a day. Approximately 1,500 less than we're suggesting a golfer may expend. And when I've done the exact same study in rugby players, we're now getting values of around 3,700. So maybe 1,300 calories less than a golfer. And hopefully by this stage, we're beginning to think, well, actually, we've got something wrong here in the literature. So there is a reasonably well-validated technique called the ActiHeart monitor. Not too inconvenient to wear, and we've done a lot of research, whether it's in jockeys, rugby, all sorts of different sports, and it's been validated because not only is it heart rate, but it's got a uniaxial accelerometer within there as well. So these are the little, the ActiHeart monitors you can see on the right, attached to a little belt. Not only heart rate, as I say, we've got an accelerometer built in as well, and well validated. And what I did recently was I got some golfers of 3 handicap and under to wear these during a tournament golf situation. So these are golfers who are based at Tournament Golf College on the Algarve, and they have to play in an order of merit during the training, and then we're able to put these monitors on them and get an assessment of the energy expenditure. And this was part of Amy O'Donnell's in the audience, her master's studies when she was with me, and Amy's now providing nutrition support to the LET and Challenge Tour. And we was able to measure the energy expenditure. We did it using various modes of transport, and using this global pace of play survey, we're able to see what the most common modes of transport are. So you'll see that contrary to popular belief, particularly when we get towards Europe and the UK, but it's an electric trolley, a manual trolley, or just carrying the bag is by far the most common way. It's only when we look at other countries where you've got a big increase in caddies or buggies. But actually where we were looking at this point, we use the 3 most common, which is carrying a bag, an electric trolley, and a manual trolley. And if we look at it internationally, we put all that data together, you can still see these are by far the 3 most common ways that people get the golf bag around the golf course. So now what do we see when it comes to activity energy expenditure? Now bear in mind, the paper I said before could be as high as 2,600. We were getting around about 600 calories per round, which is slightly more than what you would get going for a brisk walk. And I think that makes much more sense. What I think was even fascinating within it was BC is bag carrying, MT is manual trolley, and ET is an electric trolley. And there wasn't really a significant difference in the energy expenditure when using these different modes, which suggests that by far the biggest energetic cost of playing golf is the actual walking. It's not the transportation of the golf clubs. What I think a lot of studies have failed to do when they look at energy expenditure within a sport like golf, which is 4 or 5 hours, one of the things they've done is they've failed to subtract what would be basal metabolic rate from it anyway. So if you were just sat down doing nothing, which we know is around about the 100 calories an hour mark-ish. So for 5 hours of golf, we can take 500 off that anyway, because that would have been what we would have just been doing anyway. So when we did it this way, the number I've come up with is around about the 550 mark. What we also did in the study, though, was we asked them the perceived effort, the perceived exertion. And what I thought was quite interesting on this simple question is that using the electric trolley, despite the energy expenditures being the same, those using the electric trolley found it much easier. So we could put potentially a suggestion there that if we're trying to encourage people to play golf, they're going to find it easier, but they're not going to lose some of the health benefits that you would have thought by carrying the club. So actually we shouldn't discourage people from playing golf with trolleys, because we're getting the same caloric equivalent, but we're maybe finding it a little bit easier. And if we find it a bit easier, are we more likely to go again and go again, which I think is a key message that we're trying to get out this week, isn't it, that we want to play often. So based on information like that, what we're able to do is actually put dietary plans together for the tour players. And you can see that if I was then to work out what does a tour golfer need when it comes to their energy expenditure. So we start at the top, the resting metabolic rate, which I've measured in the golfers. And this will, depending on the weight, will be around about 2:1. On top of that, most do some gym work every day, so a 2.5. We get the thermic effect of food, 2,750. And then dependent who you believe, me or other literature, we can add 700 or 2,467 onto that number. So then we come up with around about 3,450, which I believe is about right for a golfer, or you can believe 5,217, and I'll leave that one to yourself to make your mind up. But if we're going to go on my one, which is 3,450, this is how I would feed a golfer on a game day. And you can see that I try and simplify it to a simple picture so the players can have this on the phone. So you can see that breakfast, something like an organic muesli with some fresh berries, a 3-egg omelette. And then we try and feed the round appropriately. So we'll often use a 4, 8, 12, 16 strategy, where we get them to try and eat on hole 4, 8, 12, and 16. 4, 12, and 16 tend to be fuel, so carbohydrate-based foods. And around about the middle of the round, around about 8, we try and get some protein in there as well. So it might be like a simple chicken wrap. Obviously, lots of hydration, lots of keeping that important. Coming back in after the round, we might have some, you can see there, chicken and pasta with some vegetables. And then the evening meal, there was a steak, avocado, potato wedges, veggies, and then a pre-bed snack. Now that would come to about 3,450. Imagine the amount of food if I've got to put another 2,000 on top of that. I think we're really beginning to see that we have actually been putting some information out there that is potentially problematic. And if you wanted even more evidence that I'm right, not that I need to keep reassuring myself, that in one of the better ways of tracking energy expenditure as a toy, so I wouldn't like to publish this type of data, but these are the bands that all the tour players are wearing at the moment. And this was one of our players on Friday this week who was sending me the numbers all week. This tour player playing at the Open on Friday had 553 calories in a round of golf. And that, by the way, was 5 hours and 30 because there was a 40-minute warm-up. So that includes the 40-minute on the range, which is more than I would say. I don't know many recreational amateur golfers who would also do 40 minutes on the range before they go out there. So that's a top end, what I would think, 553 on top of your resting metabolic rate. And I think we can be pretty confident in that. And then the pictures on the right, at the same time, this golfer was sending me the foods that they were eating so I could try and add it up to see that we're the imbalance. And actually, the golfer got it absolutely spot on. That the energy intake and expenditure was perfectly matched for the week. So I was really confident that this player, regardless of how well we played, we actually fueled it correctly for the week. So when I say about I try and simplify things, a big thing I think anyone can take from this, including the recreational golfer, is that the elites really do now focus on eating the right food on the golf course. And it's no longer can of Coke and 2 chocolate bars from the pro shop, which I'm sure we've all done. You get your scorecard, pinch your pencil when the pro's not looking, get your Mars bar and get your, is it just me that does that? I'm sorry. Get your Mars bar, get your can of Coke, and then off you go. But what we try and do now with the players is give them a nice little information like this so you can see the food that we'd want them having in the golf bag. We go, in this situation, it was a 4-10-14 strategy, so a banana, some carbohydrate on hole 4, a chicken sandwich around 10, so we got some protein and some carbohydrates, another banana coming in about 14, and then there was a couple of snacks in between, should the player want a little bit more, should they be feeling hungry. And if we achieve that, I'm really confident that we're going to maintain energy levels, maintain focus, and fuel that round correctly. So what about the regular player who's pulling the cart bag and posing nicely for pictures so we don't get in trouble for copyright? The reason I'm passionate about getting this message out there is because I think a round of golf is about 500 calories. And I think it's an incredible way, that, like everybody in this room, to improve our health, our social, mental, physical well-being, and everything like that. But if you're going to use it to look after your waistline, we can't be doing that at the same time, which I think a lot of recreational golfers do because they believe it's this high-intensity, high-energy sport, with false narrative that I think's been put out there. So if you were just to have simply 2 chocolate bars and a bottle of Coke, you have now eaten more than you've expended during that round of golf. On top of that, you've got your pre-round bacon butty, which is a must, and your burger and chips at the end. It's no wonder that sometimes we look at golf clubs and people aren't as healthy as what we should be. And being a nutritionist, of course I'm going to be biased, but all the stuff I see about physical exercise, I think is marvelous. But if we don't pair that with the correct nutrition, we really are teeing off into a gale, and we're going to get nowhere very quickly. So I think it's crucial that these messages on exercise are put out there, but they've got to be paired up with good nutrition. And unfortunately, I don't see that translating anywhere near as well as what I'm seeing the benefits of walking and the mental side of it being shown out there. So I think we've got a huge opportunity, not only in the first 3, but even in things like body composition, because we're seeing that the modern golfer's changing shape. We're reading newspaper articles like how Rory muscled his way to the top. So we would think that that is the ideal body composition. But then we also see great things like the Bullet winning tournaments, who isn't the standard body shape. And how good is that for our beautiful sport? That actually you can be unbelievably successful in all shapes and sizes. And we need to really understand, I think, that do you have to be this Adonis specimen on a golf course to be elite? And I don't even think that research has been done yet, understanding what is the ideal body composition. You know, we've seen Matt Fitzpatrick recently put on massive distance in driving distance. But for me, that's not corresponded with a massive increase in muscle mass. That's just some hard work, some gym work, some technique work, but not suddenly looking like a beefcake. But we really don't even know that yet. For me, it's so exciting researching golf. It's like a skier who's found fresh powder, because we have got so little to actually do or in existence that we should all be sat here, anyone who's got a research interest, thinking, bring it on, because we can make a huge difference. And then we heard before from Signpost about the clinical side of things. And again, that research just isn't out there. A big area of interest for me is vitamin D. And we know that the majority of the world and the majority of the golf playing world will be insufficient in vitamin D throughout the year. So what we understand in other sports is the implications of low vitamin D, not only on physical performance, but on our immune system and even our mental health. We did some research at John Moores a few years ago now where we took people from low vitamin D to a standard vitamin D concentration greater than 100 nanomoles per litre. We damaged the muscle using eccentric contractions, and the group that were corrected for vitamin D was able to regenerate much better. I heard people talking about muscle soreness in golfers and things like that. If we've got people playing golf with low vitamin D, the chances are they are going to be more sore in the days following it. But I say the chances because we've never studied vitamin D in golf. We don't know, is it going to affect the recreational golfer when it comes to their muscle soreness, their enjoyment, which then means their willingness to go again. Some brilliant work from Mike Gleason at Loughborough showed that when it comes to URTIs, there's a real strong correlation with your vitamin D concentration. So if you look on the left-hand side of this table, when we've got optimal status, not only is the severity score much lower, but the duration of having that URTI is much shorter. All the way over to when you're deficient, you can see that from 5 to 13 days, we would basically have a URTI from nearly 3 times the length of time if we're vitamin D deficient. And that's why now working with Signpost, we're looking to measure this. There's some real cool ways that we can collect blood now. We're starting to use these quite a lot within the university for doing in the field research trials. These little clips just clip onto the arm and collect some blood samples. And then we're putting our supplement strategies together. So that's one that we did in collaboration with Signpost for vitamin D for golfers. And the other thing I don't think we give anywhere near enough attention to is iron. And this, again, is just a little pet hate of mine. There's loads of evidence out there now that, particularly when it comes to athletic performance, we should minimally be measuring it annually, if not biannually, particularly females, and then quarterly in some situations. And the data out there in athletes would suggest up to 11% of males and 35% of females, if measured, would be iron deficient. And in some athletic populations, in some sports, this has been shown to be as high as 50%. So in rugby and football where I work, we do it a lot more often than we're doing at the moment. Again, with Signpost, we're going to improve this. And we look at serum ferritin, hemoglobin, and transferrin saturation. And based on that, we'll diagnose people as stage 1, 2, or 3, and we'll try and prevent problems before it happens. And that's what we're trying to do at the moment with the blood screening service that we're offering on the tour via Signpost. So finally, just to wrap up, I know I'm right on my time now. Based on the little bit of research that we're doing and decades of work in this field, we've been able to put together now minimum catering standards for the tournaments. And I believe this is having a huge effect. But actually now we're able to feed people better. If we talk about what people now talk the COM-B barrier to behaviour change, so capability, opportunity, motivation will drive behaviour. Well, one of the big problems we had in golf was the opportunity, whereby we were telling the players this is what you should be eating and to be healthy and everything like that, and then putting burger and chips in the dining hall. And I'll be very tactful here, but the opportunity at lunch today probably wasn't great to get vegetables. So it's how can we put players on the road for so many weeks of the year and not at least give them the opportunity to eat the foods that we want them to eat. So each tournament now has these minimum standards. We also, because we drive a real food-first culture on the tour, and by this is rather than jump into supplements, we will try and get our nutrition in whole foods wherever possible. We will come up with our little energy bowls like this that are homemade. We'll put infographics up at the course. You can see basically what I said to you before, there's a 5, 10, 15 strategy of what to eat, when, where, and why. We put together little homemade protein bowls that the players get to see, and you'll see that we're able to get these into the players as best we can. And then this was actually at the Ryder Cup, so you can see these on the right are then protein bowls with homemade flapjacks. We have nuts and seeds, fruit, and we give our players every opportunity to go onto that golf course fully fueled and maintaining the energy throughout the tournament. We'll also put messages out about hydration, the importance of it, the importance not to become dehydrated, and I think that's a really easy translatable message to the recreational golfer. I'm sure we've all done it, even on warm days. We've bought a water bottle, put it in our bag, and it's only when we're putting our stuff back in the bag at the end of a round to get our car keys, we find the water bottle that we haven't touched. And what we need to do, I think, is get much better at keeping hydrated on the round. And a simple tip I give to the players is when the putter goes in the golf bag, the water bottle comes out. And they walk to the next tee carrying that water bottle. And that's a real easy way to remember to take water on board during the round. We'll put the signposts out, we'll try and put fruit-infused water out so the players can have good options at the course as well. And we try and improve gut health by making sure things like Yakults and things like that are available at all the tournaments with little infographics as well as how this may be beneficial. Okay, so my final thought is this, and hopefully my excitement and passion has come across a little bit today. I can get a little bit excited at times, I know it. But I think it's really exciting because we're at the start of a journey. When I look in football, and my department at Liverpool is obviously obsessed with football, you're sometimes scratching your head for the next research question. We're here, you just don't know where to start because there's so much that we can do. There's so many fundamental questions that we need to answer. But we've got to try and assess these using validated techniques, not just out of convenience, because sometimes the wrong information can do more harm than good. I think we understand the energy costs a lot better now, and now we can get a bit more prescriptive with our plans. I think the future work, we need to look at DLW. You know, it's a simple way of measuring, just to confirm what I think it is. We need to do this biochemistry, the vitamin D, the iron, etc. We need to look at body composition. And then, only at that point, can we then really get very golf-specific and individualised with our advice. So a massive thanks for joining us today. It's been an absolute honour and pleasure to be here. Sorry for going slightly over. And I think probably we'll answer questions at the end while I've run on a little bit. So thank you.